So the big tax question is this: how do wealthy people keep their money working for them when selling their business, real estate, or other highly appreciated assets without paying hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in tax? What if we, as business and real estate owners who have poured blood, sweat, and tears to growing our wealth, and who didn't hire expensive tax attorneys and CPAs to map out an exit strategy, knew their secrets? Instead of recreating the wheel, why can't we just model the way they deferred 30 to 50% in tax, paid off debt, funded their next business dream, and most importantly, leave a financial legacy to give to the causes we believe in most? What if their secrets weren't complicated at all, and you just need a guide who is a few steps ahead of you? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Brett Swarts, and welcome to Capital Gains Tax Solutions. Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling and compounding your wealth and life starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more all of it away to help MVPs. My name is Brett Swarts. Each and every episode, we're joined by the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, or billionaires, and they share their secrets, wisdom, and insight with us. And today is no exception. We have an amazing guest who is on a mission and has a passion for helping build purpose and scaling with branding. In fact, he's the co-founder and CEO of Noble Studios, a creative digital performance marketing agency. And under his leadership, the company has grown from a small startup to an international firm serving brands such as Autodesk, the islands of Tahiti, Adobe, Disney, Visa, and Google, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Jarrod Lopiccolo. Jarrod, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Brett. Thank you very much.
The coolest last name ever. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, can you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, so, an entrepreneur, which is comes with good and bads. I was about 16 years old and, graduated high school early, decided to get into architecture. That was sort of following the family way, if you will. And then I fell in love with this concept of branding and if you will, virtual architecture as opposed to digital architecture. So ultimately helping build the internet sort of one brand at a time, one web connection at a time, one person at a time. And yeah, as you've mentioned, we've scaled. We've got multiple offices. We're currently serving a lot of the travel and tourism industry. We love the product they sell, which ultimately experiences and memories. And I'm still having fun after 22 years of running a business. And I run it with my wife. So my wife's a copywriter, and I was a designer by trade. And now, of course, we're just business people. And our clients are actually our team, is our team members. So
I love it. This is great. And by the way, you're in Lake Tahoe, which is a Reno area. It's a dear space of mine. Grew up in Sacramento Bay Area, and we would spend lots of summer weeks up there in winter too, doing some snowboarding. So that's great. So love that. So let's dive in right into the topic at hand, which is scaling with branding.
Yeah.
So Jarrod, what's the number one secret when it comes to helping companies that have already scaled, let's say, from $1 million to $1 million in revenue, but they're looking to go to 3, 5, 10 million? What's the number one secret to helping them to scale up?
Yeah, well, I often talk about, when you are an entrepreneur, you're really good at identifying where there's gaps, right, or where there's demand, and then you know how to fill that demand. And so oftentimes, those that are hearing, today's podcast, and as an entrepreneur, you're like, oh yeah, we sell that, we do that, even though you don't, and then you sort of figure out how to do it. And I think you have to move past that scrappy sort of stage, and you got to start to actually put roots in the ground. So into your point of brand, but also vision and mission of a company. Oftentimes, those visions and missions aren't created at the forefront because you don't really know what you're doing right at the time. You're sort of, like I said, identifying a demand and you're selling into it. And then later you realize, okay, actually we've got to say no to certain clients or to certain industries or to certain services or experiences or products that we sell. And we've got to say yes to this. And I think having a really, really sort of North Star, true focus, of a brand that's really succinct and people can remember you, I think is critical to getting you to that next stage.
I love it. I think about the time when I was naming my business, right? I was like, how do I name my business? And,
Right.
Is it my name? Is it something in there? Is it, and I can tell me what you think. I came up with Capital Gains Tax Solutions.
Right.
And it's focused like a laser on helping people who have a capital gains tax problem. So It's Capital Gains Tax Solutions, right? And so that's been the name of the company, and that's what we do. And then within that, we'll help people, with their different options and figure out what's a good thing, but for the business or the real estate or whatever they're exiting. I feel like it's been pretty good. Now, I took this to the podcast, but then I figured, well, that's pretty narrow. Then we launched our Build It to Billions podcast. So and that's kind of, getting a little broader to, but I'm curious, like when you're strategizing, even just with a name, right?
Yeah.
Or a core value or a vision, what's some of the wisdom that you found the best companies are doing?
Yeah, well, at first, I love talking about this topic in the terms of really honing in, who you want to sell your product, your services or experiences to. And I think to your point, like you could either be sort of 1 inch deep and a mile wide, or you can be 1 inch wide and a mile deep. And I think, nowadays, I think it's really important to specialize, right? And to identify right off the bat who your customers are and who your customers aren't. And that's okay, right? A lot of people feel, oh no, everyone's my customer. But in reality, when you start to do that, you dilute yourself and you become the vanilla, and then you're nothing to everyone as opposed to something to a small select group of people. So I actually 100% believe that, within about 3 to 6 seconds after hearing that sort of one strap line, you should know exactly, what that company is and who they serve, and if you identify with them or not. And I think that if you have to spend longer than that, people's attention span, I mean, we're in the shortage of attention span these days. People are just going to go to the next option, right, and forget about you. And that's one of the saddest moments is when, one of your customers forgets about you.
100%, right? By the way, speaking with Jarrod Lopiccolo, and it is spelled Lopiccolo, and you can find him on LinkedIn. I look him up, and you can also even check out noblestudios.com. Okay, so that makes sense. So you've got to really make sure that it's concise, it's memorable, and it is going exactly to who you're serving. Back to the vision piece, I imagine for your team, right? And it's probably a lot of the same concepts, right? Like so. Difference, give us a little bit of crafting or getting the vision statement and the mission statement and getting that really crystal clear within your team.
Yeah, well, I feel that, most companies really don't take the effort to actually produce a vision that really allows you to say yes and no. And I think that's the most important part about a vision is it helps act as a filter. And this is like who you're going to partner with, what type of team members you're going to hire, what products you're going to make, and which ones you're not going to make. And it's just as hard to go after something and say yes to it as it is to say no to something else. But this is something that I see a lot of entrepreneurs really, take about 4 to 5 years to actually realize, okay, you know what, we are a little floundering right now. We're working 80-hour work weeks. We're serving, we're keeping the lights on, we're paying our bills and payroll, all these pieces. But how do we get to the next, layer? How do we get to the next step? And I think that once you establish the vision, everything sort of cascades off of that, right? It's sort of the butterfly effect. And then at that point, then you actually have to start to look for who's your right senior leadership team, right? Because you can't just have a good vision and a good mission and then carry that ball across the court all by yourself. You actually have to have a team that you can interact with, that you can bring problems to, that you can solve together, and you can ultimately work on the business as much as you're going to work in the business on. And so the next step truly to what I see the most successful companies take is they start to align that senior leadership team towards that vision, towards that mission, and they ultimately become the sort of servant leaders of your business, right? Making decisions with or without you. When you decide to take a long sabbatical, right? They're the ones that know when there's an if-then statement. If this happens, then do that. If this happens, then do this. And then you come back and you realize, you know what? You did a great job of keeping that going. That's yours now, and you can keep it. And now I've relieved myself of a few things as a leader, and I can then attach new, greater, bigger things. And that's how growth ultimately happens.
This is beautiful. By the way, I don't know if you know what you're saying too is also biblical, but there's a parable basically where Jesus says, hey, God will come back and he gave 1 talent, 5 and 10, and then basically 1, 2, and 5. And what happened when he came back? Did they double it, or did they just put it on the rock? Did they just not make decisions? And well, I was waiting for you to come back, and you're like, oh, okay, well, go. At least you can learn through that, and you would have either got it half right or a quarter right or all the way right. And so I'm entrusting and I'm giving you that courage and the authority to make that decision, especially when I'm gone, because otherwise you become the bottleneck the entire time. No one really ever grows because everyone's just waiting on you. I call one of my mentors, Don Winter, he calls it being the guy who can tell time. He goes, be a clock maker, not a time teller, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Constantly practice that, and instead of being the guy who has the answers and can make the decisions. So this is really good, and I want to make it really practical, right? So our this is, I think people can learn this way. So here's our mission statement, right? Like for my company, we exist to unlock capital gains, to multiply freedom and impact. Okay.
Yep.
And then we go, what's the freedom? Well, first it's the freedom for the family, for either the ability to retire or the freedom for the entrepreneur to do the next thing. Financial freedom, time freedom, all that kind of, so there's freedom.
Yep.
Also, it's the freedom for our team. Right? We exist to unlock capital gains.
Right.
We're going to earn to get freedom for our team members. And then the next piece is impact, right? So that what? So they can go make a bigger impact for their family, for their communities, for the causes they believe in. And the same thing is for our team members. And so it's trying to get that aligned. And so any feedback on our mission statement, how does that sound?
No, I think I love that you can compartmentalize each piece, right, in component, like break it out into components. I think it's really important that your mission addresses who, which you talked about, right, internal and external, what services you're providing, and then how you do that, right? What is the process of ultimately doing that? And I think that the best missions and visions ultimately have that. And they also should be a bit aspirational and both inspirational, so it gets you fired up, right? On a Monday, you're like, I'm proud to be at work. I'm excited because we're on this mission, but also aspirational, almost slightly unattainable, because that allows you to like continue to stretch and stay in the space of what if or what happens this, and keeps you curious, right? And always forever learning. And so I think both of those have to also be added in. Not saying yours doesn't have that, but just the ones I see that are the best are ones that do lead with some aspiration and inspiration.
Yeah, and then the people are purpose-driven entrepreneurs, so we focus on that. And so, we could say we exist to unlock capital gains for purpose-driven entrepreneurs to multiply freedom and impact. It gets kind of long, right? So it's like, and then if you just say entrepreneurs, well, not really. It's really purpose-driven entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And then if you really break it down, it's really those who have achieved, $1, $5, $10, $100 million of valuation on their exit. And so it's not just, so it's sometimes I have a tough time, so I try to just shorten it out there.
Yeah.
But then when they say who, and then I have the who on my website. So talk about just conciseness, because you're right. Attention is like, it's hard. People have less and less attention. So making it concise. Any other tips on that?
Well, you just struck a chord in that. It's so easy to sort of word stuff, and we're actually seeing a lot of that, as with like AI slop and work slop, all that stuff. It's just stuffing all these words, so it's so much harder to distill down. And one of the exercises that we do with our clients is we pull a word out and we say, does it still, is it still resonating, right? We pull another word out. Is it still resonating? Does it still have soul? Does it still have character? All those pieces. I would say one of the most important parts, though, of branding and building a vision, building a mission, it has to be adopted internally as much as it is externally, right? And so we call these sometimes organizational thoughts. And of course, everyone uses the Just Do It Nike one. But if you think about Just Do It for the inside, right, the inside team, the ambassadors, the brand ambassadors inside, it's like, just do it. Don't ask for permission. If you've got a good idea, bring it to the table, push the limits, try something new, right? And then on the outside, right, these athletes, even whether you're an athlete or not an athlete, it's just like, just do it. Like, get off the couch, just do it. Like, or, set that big hike or set that big, milestone, or you want to hit your best, personal best, right? Like all those pieces. And I think that so whenever you look at your vision and mission, make sure that it not only, resonates on the inside, because they're the ones that will have to carry it during those really crazy stormy patches of weather, right? It's like, it's real easy when it's just fair sailing, but you really rely on your vision and mission when you're hitting the storm, when you're right in the middle of it.
And would you say Nike's vision is just do it? Is that what you're saying? Just or what do you like?
Well, it's their strap line, right? Ultimately, right? And their mantra and stuff. But it's also, I think, what people resonate the most is what they remember most about. And I think that so whether it's your strap line that happens to craft your mission and vision, or it's your vision and mission, and then you have a strap line, I think either way, you want to be memorable.
Yeah. Again, try to apply this, because I mean, we could say just defer it. I mean, we could say, just plan it. I'm just, because that's really what, what would you say? Well, just plan it. I mean, just 5 hours of planning, and you can have an extra 30, 40, 50% more at exit. Like, that's kind of a no-brainer, because you spent 10,000 hours building this thing, and you want another 20 to 50%. And so, okay, let's keep going here.
Yeah, please.
I appreciate you helping me apply this to my business too, to see it, but I think it'll be really practical. So talk about the team. So you said the team get along with the vision. And so, I mean, I imagine you're recruiting and you're sharing this vision. and I think of this, the Steve Jobs when he's recruiting so-and-so is selling Pepsi or whatever, sugar water, that the famous line. And so he says, you want to go change the world or you want to keep selling sugar water? And so is that what you mean by that? So when you're recruiting, that you are sharing the vision and you're seeing, not just an emotional buy-in, but like a purpose buy-in. Is that what we're looking for?
I think so. I think I believe the new businesses today have to be purpose driven. I think the new generation that's growing up, you can't just hit them like they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago at Google with buffets and bring your laundry in and daycare and things like that. I think they actually have to be purpose driven, at least ones that will survive and ones that will attract that younger, talent, if you will. So when we look for leadership, we align around ethos and principles, and our core values, right? And we're very public about our core values and our principles. Like we hire based on them, we fire based on them, we reward based on those. And I think that builds the culture that ultimately creates the differentiation of one company versus another, right? Is the people. And because you could be selling the greatest products in the world, but if you don't have the good people behind it, right, then you lack in customer service and you lack in follow through or repair, whatever, and fill in the blank. And so for us, when we're attracting our leadership team, first we identify who's missing, like what voice is missing at the table, right, based on our own business. And we do this with our clients as well, is to say, okay, well, you're doing this for the world. You really need a product person, or you're doing this for the world. You really need, a recruitment person because of your, whatever your product or services or experiences you're selling. And then you identify first who's missing, right? What voice is missing at the table, and then you want to make sure that as you're recruiting, that they're aligned to the same core values and principles and such. Because then they, to your point back earlier, then they become the servant leaders, right? They carry that mission forward, and they make decisions based on the business and its ethos and its principles versus based on the founder or the entrepreneur.
That's so good. They're starting to take stewardship, right? And they're becoming like an ownership mentality, and they're owning their piece of it, but they're stewarding like what's this bigger piece of it that they're now being a part of, which totally makes sense. Okay, let's keep moving here. So that's great. So you get some leadership in place. You get them dialed in with the core values and the vision and the mission. What's the next thing from $1 million in revenue to trying to get to 10 million? What would you say is the next big piece to the puzzle here?
Well, and I'm sure many that are listening to the podcast have listened to a lot of these self-help books, things like that. But there's one in particular, it's so overly quoted, but it is the Jim Collins Good to Great, where it's, getting the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus, right? And that's the leadership team we just spoke about. So it's also identifying, are there people that are on the bus that shouldn't be on the bus, right? That aren't aligned to your principles, aren't aligned to those visions. So let's assume that you get past this point. You've got a vision, you've got a brand, you know who your audience is, right? You're targeting it, you're fulfilling on it. Now you have this amazing internal team, right? That can make decisions based on behalf of the company. At that point, I believe you need some type of a operational system that holds all of it together, that allows you to scale to multiple offices, that allows you to add more team members and more people, and it just becomes a function of scalability. And one of the things we've attached ourselves to over the years is the EOS model, right? And it's really this entrepreneurial operating system. It's by Traction. I don't get I'm not getting an affiliate plug here. It's just something that we really subscribe to. But what it is as I mentioned earlier, you have people that work in the business and then you have people that work on the business. And you need those people to be both, right? They need to be able to understand how to service clients, add services, expand services, refine services, whatnot. And then you need people to actually work on the business itself, right? Correcting those things, adjusting, looking into the future and saying, what with AI may be coming, what's that going to do to these service lines or the way that we, support our customer, our product, or if you're a restaurant and how you're a Michelin star restaurant, how you're going to create the next menu, right? And so I think that's really critical. And what I love about EOS in particular is really the discipline and the accountability that it brings. Every single week we meet with our leadership team. We start at the same time, we end at the same time, we have the same exact agenda. We go through, we check off, issues that we currently have. We set up to-dos. We then do follow-ups on those to-dos. Every quarter, we have rocks, we call them, right? And it's the whole, pebbles, rocks, boulders, all fitting into a jar. And really, when you have that alignment and you know that what other people are working on that are representing that specific voice or maybe department within your business, you know that each one of these rocks or each one of these projects that we're working on all have an interdependent relationship with each other. And that's how you scale.
Okay, so this is amazing, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs have heard this, and they heard traction, and they read the book, and EOS. Even I have too, so walk us through the transition of that. Like, how long did it take you to get on those rhythms, to get in those meetings? So like, was it hard for you, Jarrod? Like, and then like, okay, all right, where is this really going to work? And then you get the traction, right? And like, so walk us through that. Is it a 6-month process? Is it a 3-month? Is it a 2-year? Like, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, so it was about 6 to 9 months that it took us to sort of get into our groove. And I would say that those that are listening right now, when they think about that, they're like, "Oh, that's too far. I need to have a solution today," right? And the reality is you can't bake a cake, at 900 degrees, right? You've got to let it cook properly and everything else and cook and such. And so yeah, 6 to 9 months. It was difficult for me as a leader. I'm an extrovert. I like to talk. And so you want to make sure that every single person on your leadership team has an equal voice, right? And so they have these tools that you can put in place. There's like what's called the tangent button. And it's like if someone's starting to go down a rabbit hole, you just kind of anonymously hit it and nobody knows who hit it. And all of a sudden you hear this, these little bubbles that come out. And all of a sudden it gets you to think, oh shit, you know what? I was on a tangent. I shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. Or which often happens is what they call a sacred cow, where there's something in the room that you don't want to talk about, right? And it could be we have a sales problem, or it could be the person, an actual individual that sits on the department that you're not willing to address. And so that was like a really big unlock for us. And that's what probably took the 6 to 9 months the most, was this idea of like, hey, there's no sacred cows. Anything and everything we're allowed to talk about, even if it, and so then we ask for permission, we be kind, not nice, those kinds of things. And we all know that we're all working with the same intent, that we want to be better, right, every day. And that was a big deal. And then the last thing I would say is that was in that 6 to 9 months was doing an evaluation on the people in the company, right? Meaning specifically the senior leadership team. And they have what's called this little program called GWC. And it's like get it, want it, and have the capacity to do the work. So sometimes you look at a leader in your department, you're like, yeah, I think they get the role, but you know what? I don't think they want it. They just don't, they're not happy, or capacity. They don't have the time or they don't have the mental capacity to do that job. And it's important you score your people and to understand. And then you can, certain people that if they don't want the job, it's really hard to get them to want the job, right? But if they have, but capacity you can work with, you can give people more time, you can give them education so that they can, upskill themselves to handle this role. But that was really, really important to like go through that process. And that's why it took 6 to 9 months. It was really sort of a realignment, if you will. And then once you got in that alignment mode and you're like, okay, body's healthy, mental healthy, like now we can scale, now we can grow.
I absolutely love this. Jarrod Lopiccolo, everybody. Find him on LinkedIn and or by going to the website, noblestudios.com. Ray Dalio wrote a book called Principles, okay? And then he actually has like a, I guess you call it the children's book version. And it's great because it makes it really simple. But like there's a quote in here. It says, don't let your ego and blind spot barriers stand in your way.
Yeah.
And he talks in this book, in the storybook, he has the leadership team, like you're on this journey. And he goes, the best leaders are going to have thoughtful disagreement and thoughtful leaders that are going to have different viewpoints, different skill sets, different vantage points. And you're walking through the jungle. And he goes, when you have that great leadership team, it's like walking through in black and white and everything's dark and there's like these trees and you can't really see everything that's coming in front of you. But when you it's like turning the lights on and you're seeing in color when you have these others and you make it a safe, encouraging environment, and all of a sudden it lights up the next page and there's like, you can see the tiger, you can see the spider, you can see like this snake, but beforehand you couldn't even see it. And so I think as leaders and entrepreneurs, Jarrod, we have to constantly remind ourselves to not let our ego get in the way, and to get other people in the room who are going to have thoughtful disagreement and do it in a way where we collectively can hear each other, right? Because it takes an ounce of foolishness to basically ruin let's call it pounds of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
It's another proverb. It's like only takes a little, and if you just have someone to help you with that. So talk about your rhythms then, okay? So you have this. Did you find that, okay, Mondays is best for this meeting, Thursdays or Fridays are best for this meeting, and this amount of time, and of course it probably morphs as you get going there, but like what any advice for those that are saying, okay, I want to get going on this EOS.
Yeah.
What did you find as the blueprint for your meeting rhythm?
Yeah. So another, great thing that I love to talk about. Mondays are just like this ramp up period, right? We're kind of going from this personal life into this business life, and you've got emails stacked up, you've got phone calls, you had things you didn't finish from Friday. So those are most important to like actually tackle, because otherwise you're not fully present. What we found is that Wednesdays, right, the sort of the lull in the middle of the week, you're halfway through, you're grooving, you've already gotten the most important things done. You maybe even had some of those most important meetings with clients or whatnot. So what we found is Wednesdays was the perfect day for us to have our sort of senior leadership meetings. And again, it starts at 8:25, it ends at 9:55 actually. That's another kind of thing that I do, is any 30-minute meeting, I make them 25, and any 1 hour meeting, I make them 50 minutes. And what that allows for is obviously potty breaks, bathroom breaks, just a head reset before you go into the next one, and then you're not late there. But that type of cadence, and having it on a Wednesday, because we'd walk out of there with some to-dos, and you'd be like, well, you know what, I can actually get that done later today or tomorrow. Whereas if it's Monday, it's going to compete with all the other initiatives that you didn't finish from last week or the things you haven't started this week. And if it's on a Friday, you're likely going to kick it to the next week, right? So this allows you to get a little bit of that, cliche, that traction that you need to get, when working on your business. And so that's one of the things we found most successful. And it's funny, if you start to look it up, there's a lot of things that correlate with that as well. Like if you send a newsletter, don't send it on a Monday and don't send it on a Friday, right? People are checking out on Fridays and they're going to ignore it on a Monday. But a Tuesday through Thursday, you're going to have a higher open rate on your emails at that point. And so there's a lot of things that correlate because of that sort of saddle that we sit in the middle of the week.
Okay, that's huge wisdom. Got it. And so the Wednesday is that senior leadership, about a 1 hour, you say?
Yeah, it's an hour. Well, we start at 8:25 and we end at 9:55. So almost, so it's an hour and a half.
Okay. Would you an hour and a half. And would you call that a level 10 meeting, or would you have like
well done. Now you're using the full traction language. And I think what's actually important about why people call it a level 10 is that you grade the meeting right at the end. Everyone says, "Hey, did anything less than a 10?" And if someone might say, "Yeah, I give it an 8." Well, why did you give it an 8? Well, because we went way down a rabbit hole. We got off topic. So and so was a little bit feisty, or they were disengaged, or someone was multitasking, and the whole goal is is just to incrementally get better at running very efficient, disciplined, and accountable meetings where everyone walks away feeling like they're rowing together.
Okay, amazing. So that's a key one. And then there's like the daily huddle, right? Is like 5-10 minutes every morning. Do you start Monday? Do you?
So thank you for asking that, because I think this is also one of the most important parts is how do you trickle down right into the rest of the organization from these senior leadership team meetings. And so while the senior leadership meetings happen on a Wednesday, most department meetings then happen on a Thursday. And it's usually like a 45-minute to a 55-minute check-in. And that's very specific to the department that each one of those senior leadership team members represent as a voice in the company. They meet with their team and they do the same exact thing. They run those traction meetings. And they're quite efficient, and then that allows anything to cascade right out of the senior leadership team emails. So within 24 to 48 hours, if there's something that the company needs to know that came out of the senior leadership meetings, they're already being notified within their department meetings.
Smart. Okay, so Wednesday is the senior leadership 1.5, and then boom, within 24 hours or so, it's going to be the department for 45 minutes to start to take the action on that. And then again, what's the day? Is there a daily huddle, or how do you look for you guys?
No, and then we actually do. So we use Slack quite a bit. As our sort of daily water cooler conversation. We have not I would say strict rules, but we don't attach documents. Don't do this, but that's our sort of water cooler conversation. We do check-ins. Every department, each team member says, "Here's what I'm working on today," or "Here's what we're working on tomorrow," or or "This is the big initiative. I won't be available." And so it's just this really light communication, because since pandemic, a lot of companies, especially when you're in the sort of creative marketing space, a lot of us are remote. Even though we have offices and we huddle and we have these all hands meetings and stuff, most people are remote. So I think communication has to be a lot more intentional. And so we do. To your point, it's like some of our dev teams, they do the actual like scrum meetings of 15 minutes, every single day. But in the department that I oversee as well, which is more marketing and sales, we just do a quick little like, here's what I'm working on today, and that just keeps that connective tissue.
That's awesome. That's great. And then quarterly and then annual, right? Those are the next big ones. And
That's exactly right. Big quarterly meetings. Everyone gets together in person. We dedicate time to it. We actually grade the company as well at that moment. How's our vision? How's our values? How's our services? How's our ICP? How are all these things? Are they still relevant? Is there anything that we need to workshop? But one of the most important things I didn't mention actually, because I believe that best leaders, right, they ask the great questions as opposed to talk so much, right? Even though I'm talking a lot today, it's the nature of our conversation, of the situation. But one of the things we do is they call it the segue. And this is like, it's easy to forget this, and it's hard to implement. But it's basically, we start out the first 5 minutes, whether it's a senior leadership meeting or a department meeting, basically saying one positive thing in the last 7 days that happened with you personally in your personal life, and that happened with you in your business life. And many people will be like, oh, I don't want to talk about my personal life. But if you do it just a few times, what you end up finding out is you have so much in common authentically with other people that you become accountable to those people, right? So when you need help, right, when you need to raise your hand and say, gosh, we're in this weathered storm, this moment of time, so many people come to the aid because they have a personal relationship with you. They know that you had a hard weekend, but you were out in your garden, or they know that you had family come in town and you had this difficult conversation, or whatever the case is. But that just humanizes all of us and connects all of us together. And then, of course, you get to understand what their love language is from a work standpoint. If they're like, I love the fact that, we won this piece of business. Okay, that's what they value. I love the fact that we worked together on this and we accomplished this thing. And so you just really get to understand the spectrum of both their personal and business life. And at that point, once you have that, you're a well-oiled machine.
Oh, Jarrod, this has been absolutely amazing. And we got to do a little segue here.
Yeah, fair.
Before we go lightning round. But oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that segue piece. One personal, one work, positive. And just that importance of rapport. I remember being in sales, Marcus Milchap, and my mentor was like, hey, if he's talking, you're selling, or if he's talking, you're doing good. And make sure that you're really rapport on the front end and the back end, and really anytime that you can, because that's really where the business is won. It's not in like your technical expertise and all this other stuff. Like that's the 20%. Like it's rapport, it's relationship, it's understanding, it's listening, asking great questions, open-ended questions, diving in. We can go into a whole other thing if you haven't studied Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, and really it's a study of communication, mirroring, and labeling. I was listening to the masterclass again today. I've listened to it probably not even exaggerating, 100 times. Wow. It's called Masterclass Chris Voss, because I read the book and it was great. But still, like, you don't quite, okay, you're reading it. You listen to the audio. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. You go to the masterclass, Jarrod, and like he's literally showing you, like this is, and he's in his voice, his tone, and I listen over and over and over again, and I feel like I'm a better listener now, right? It took me about 70 times or whatever you call it, but I'm a better listener. And this thing of mirroring and labeling emotions behind what's being said, mirroring what they're saying. Active listening is a skill that is not taught. And you've got to, I feel like I had to catch it from like Chris Voss, because I've read other books on communication and sales. This is a whole nother level of, anyway, so I encourage everyone to check that out. Get the Masterclass app and to listen to that. It's called just look up Chris Voss on there, Art of Negotiation. Okay. I want to transition into one thing and then we'll do the lightning round. Or exiting, okay? So the entrepreneurs you work with, and maybe even yourself, like large exits, California, Nevada's a little better in California, but in the States, it's 20 to 50% of the cap gains tax that people are facing. And I'm wondering if you or yourself, anyone you know that's been faced with a large exit and is hit with a huge tax bill, what did you do if you and or what do you, I know I'm not a tax guy, I get it, but like any framework around that? Because I imagine you've been a part of a lot of entrepreneurs who have exited.
I have, yes. And it's interesting. There's sort of two camps, right? You sit in one, you're building a business to eventually exit, right? To have that event. And then the other is you're building a sort of legacy, right? And I see those two sort of sitting on, in poles against each other. I have a good friend who just exited a software business, upwards of about 98 million. And right away he went into looking at businesses that he could invest in that were like not tax harbors, but one was like a solar industry where he was able to go into and got this really healthy sort of tax incentive. Others I've seen work in certain states and working with their economic development agencies that exist there to see what kind of benefits they can get by say, setting up another business, right? And so bringing that revenue into building a business, say even Nevada, right? We called it the Tesla effect. When Tesla came in and they announced that they were going to, hire 6,000 jobs in the Reno Tahoe area, there was 22 other companies within 24 hours said that they're going to now set up a business here. And so I've seen that happen too, where there's exits, and then they look for these really tax favorable incentives within states, because a lot of times people don't want to stop, right? They don't want to just like sell their business, jump out of the airplane with all their cash and float to a beach, right? It's like oftentimes they go right to the next thing. They already had irons in the fire. And so those are the things I've seen. I will say I'm now kind of camping into, not legacy in the sense that I want everyone to know we were a successful business, but I remember there was this I was at this Inc. 5000 conference, and I was sitting in the audience, and there was Blair Enns, who's he's an advisor for agencies, and he asked everyone to close their eyes, and he called it Blairtopia, and he said, I want everybody to close your eyes. And he goes, and now, or first he asked the question, how many of you are growing a business to sell? And 98% of the, whatever, almost 100% of the audience raised their hand. He said, okay, now I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine you can never sell your business. You can never exit your business. You have to stay with it forever. What one thing would you change today, right? And then it said, now, what are the 5 things you change in the next year? And then he had everyone write them down, and then they collected these, and then they shipped to you a year later as like postcards. And whether you decide to sell the business or not, I think what the exercise showed was that there are things oftentimes in your business that you're not willing to address or fix or focus because you're focused on that exit, right? That event. Well, I'll just put up with it for another year, and then I'll sell the business, and then I can have this thing. And one of the things that mind you, we're a couple that started the business, but mind you, we have almost 100 employees, and we're doing quite well. But one of the things was we needed a break. We needed to have a sabbatical, and so that was the first thing we instituted was a 6-week sabbatical. And by doing that, we got to step away from the business. These team members, did things really well, and some things they didn't do that well, and that allowed us to build systems and processes in place. Another thing was we needed to pay ourselves more. You start checking off the list, and then you realize, shit, we got a business that we could sell, and it's actually quite attractive to purchase now because we have good margins, we have time off, right? Not all decisions are made by the founders and the entrepreneurs. So I would say build a business to sell, and then you'll either sell and you'll do really well, or you'll build a business to sell and you never have to sell it, And then at that point, what cascades out of that is those tax advantages and opportunities for investments and things like that.
This is so rich, right? We started kind of building a brand to scale, right? Or building a business by scaling and branding in the beginning here. But this is really, this is amazing, Jarrod. This is a masterclass on all of these things. I will also just plug the company real fast, right? For what we do. So we just did like a big tech entrepreneur exit, over 70 million. We've done business, Bitcoin, real estate all across the U.S. I started in Taxifornia, I call it. We now live in Florida, but we still have team members all over the U.S. But the point is all this. People exit and they want exactly what you said. They want the entrepreneur freedom and flexibility, but they also want the flexibility to be retired, a little bit of both.
That's right.
It's a season of life. Like their kids are 10 and they're going to be 18 soon, and they're like, well, I like to have way more flexibility with time with the family before they're 18, and then I want to be an entrepreneur again. Sometimes they want to start a real estate company investment. Sometimes they want to do real estate and go into business, and vice versa. So you really need a strategy that unlocks that freedom and capital, and this is what we do. We build trust with installment sale methods that doesn't require any like-kind replacement requirement, doesn't have any charity, life insurance, or gifting required, but it also eliminates the estate tax. So back to that $92 or $98 million one. It's not just cap gains tax. It's anything above 30 million subject to a 40% debt tax, and 15 million single is a 40% debt tax. And so we have a strategy that eliminates that debt tax on the sale of that $100 million company, all in one sale one day, plus all of the growth. Now your kids are the beneficiaries. You'll pay some tax over time. So just knowing the game, knowing the rules, and doing a little bit of planning. And then you can still invest into the solar stuff or the real estate stuff, but you're not forcing that. Not that he's saying he is. I'm sure it's a great deal, but you're not having to force the investment to offset the tax. You're able to keep this capital and go wherever basically you want, and you solve the root cause. Anyways, if people want to learn more, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We wrote a book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Again, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We're way over time, so I'm just going to do the final lightning round question.
Okay.
This is Jarrod. After all your success, helping all the people you've helped, how do you best keep a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership?
I think about the many cups that we have in our life, whether it's community or in hobbies or personal or business. And I think it's really critical that you survey all of those and you make sure that they're equally filled, right? Because oftentimes we can overfill the work one or overfill the family one, and then you're not exercising passion or being with friends and family. And so that keeps that balance to me, that tension of like, staying relevant, being a steward, but at the same time, like serving myself. I always say you got to make sure you're financially, mentally, and physically healthy before you can really help others.
Oh my gosh, Jarrod Lopiccolo, I want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. So much insight, so much value. You over-delivered. Thank you so much. People meet you on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is the best place. And again, I'm going to spell the last name, Lopiccolo. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I want to thank all of our listeners. This is another episode of the Build to Billions podcast. We're also on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. We're on this journey with you to scale from millions to billions so we can get more all the way to help MVPs, the most vulnerable people. Take this episode, rewind it, share it with somebody, and anyone who's looking for branding to scale, please consider Jarrod and his team. That being said, appreciate everyone listening and watching, and we'll talk to you all again real soon. Bye now.
You have just listened to another information-packed episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions with Brett Swarts. We hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. Visit capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to access the show notes and to access more resources. Don't forget to leave a review and join us again next time.